I was dead for 5 minutes, then I saw Jesus. My name is Nathaniel Carter, and at the age of 34, I encountered something beyond human understanding. I never thought I would be the one to have a near-death experience, until the day everything changed. One moment, I was alive. The next, I was gone. No heartbeat, no breath. For 5 minutes, my soul wandered beyond the veil of this world. I felt weightless, drifting away from the broken shell of my body. Then, in the midst of darkness, a presence emerged, a light more radiant than anything I had ever seen. And then, I saw him. Jesus stood before me, his eyes filled with love, wisdom, and something I still struggle to put into words. What he revealed in those few moments altered my life forever. This is my story, a testimony of death, the afterlife, and the divine encounter that changed everything. The day started like any other, ordinary and uneventful. I had no premonition, no strange feelings, no warning signs that my life was about to take a turn into the unknown. The air was crisp, the sun shone through my window, and I went about my routine without a second thought. If someone had told me that in just a few hours, I would be hovering between life and death, witnessing something beyond human comprehension, I wouldn't have believed them. It happened suddenly. One moment, I was fully present in my body, feeling the familiar rhythm of my breath, the pulse of life within me. The next, I was slipping away. It was as if something had reached into my chest and pulled me out of myself. There was no time to react, no moment to process what was happening. My heart stopped. My body collapsed. Everything I had ever known was gone in an instant. At first, there was confusion. I was aware of the physical world, but I no longer belonged to it. I saw my body lying there, motionless, and I realized with eerie clarity that I was separate from it. I could see my surroundings, hear faint sounds in the distance, but I was no longer bound by the limitations of flesh. It was a strange, weightless sensation, as if I had been unshackled from something I never even knew was holding me down. I wasn't afraid. That was the most surprising part. There was no panic, no struggle to return. If anything, I felt an overwhelming peace, a serenity so deep that it wrapped around me like a gentle embrace. The pain, the worries, the noise of the world, it all faded away. I had stepped beyond the threshold of life, and for the first time, I understood just how temporary everything had been. As I floated above my own body, I became acutely aware of details I had never noticed before. The way the light flickered in the room, the way dust particles danced in the air. Time seemed irrelevant, stretched and distorted, as if I were existing in a space where minutes and seconds no longer mattered. I could hear voices, muffled at first, then growing clearer. People were rushing to my side, calling my name, pressing their hands against my lifeless body. But I couldn't respond. I wasn't there anymore, not in the way they needed me to be. A strange pull began to take hold of me, an invisible force gently urging me away from the scene. It wasn't something I resisted. It felt natural, like a current carrying me towards something greater. I was drifting, weightless, without any sense of fear or hesitation. The further I moved, the less I cared about the world I had left behind. I should have been terrified, should have felt the desperate urge to cling to my existence, but none of those emotions surfaced. There was only acceptance, a deep knowing that I was being led toward something far beyond my understanding. Darkness surrounded me, but it wasn't an empty void. It was warm, vast, and full of something indescribable. I wasn't alone. I could sense something. Someone, watching, waiting. It was as if an unseen presence was guiding me, though I couldn't see who or what it was. There was no pain, no sorrow, only an overwhelming sensation of being completely known. Every thought I had ever had, every secret I had ever kept, every doubt, fear, and failure, it was all laid bare, and yet I felt no judgment. Instead, I felt love, pure and unfiltered. A soft hum filled the air, a vibration that seemed to resonate within my very essence. It wasn't music, not in the way I had known it before, but it carried a melody that spoke directly to my soul. The more I listened, the lighter I felt. Every burden I had carried in life seemed to dissolve, as if they had never existed in the first place. I wasn't just observing. I was becoming part of something infinite, something far beyond the human experience. Memories flashed before me, not in a linear sequence, but all at once. I saw my childhood, my family, moments of joy and sorrow, laughter and regret. But I wasn't just reliving them, I was seeing them from a new perspective, as if I were outside of time itself. The moments that had seemed so important, so all-consuming in life, now felt small, fleeting. I realized how much I had taken for granted, how little I had truly understood about the purpose of my existence. And then, the darkness began to shift. A light appeared in the distance, soft and golden, radiating warmth that filled every part of me. It wasn't harsh or blinding, it was inviting, like the first rays of the sun after a long night. The pull became stronger, and I felt myself moving toward it without hesitation. There was no need to question, no need to doubt. I knew, deep within my very being, that I was being called forward. I hovered above my body, suspended between two realities. Below me, the scene unfolded in slow motion, my lifeless form sprawled out, motionless, as people rushed in desperation. I could see every detail with stunning clarity, as though my senses had been sharpened beyond human capability. The frantic movements, the panicked voices, the desperate attempts to revive me, it all seemed distant, like watching a play from the highest balcony. There was no pain, no struggle, just a quiet detachment as I observed what was happening. My first thought wasn't panic or fear but rather a strange curiosity. I knew, without a doubt, that I should have been in that body, that it was mine, and yet, I felt no attachment to it. It was as if I were looking at an old photograph of myself, a version of me that no longer held the same importance it once did. I noticed every tiny detail with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. The lines on the faces of those around me, the way their eyes darted between each other in silent fear, the tremor in their hands as they worked to bring me back. I could even hear their thoughts, not in a way that involved words, but more like a wave of emotions washing over me. Their fear, their desperation, their hope, all mingled together into a force more powerful than anything I had ever felt in life. I watched as someone pressed their fingers against my neck, searching for a pulse that wasn't there. Another voice, tense and urgent, called out for help, demanding action, demanding time that was slipping away. It was a strange thing, watching my own death unfold while feeling so utterly at peace. I had always imagined death to be a violent ripping away from life, a moment filled with terror and resistance, but that wasn't what I experienced. Instead, it was a gradual drifting, a transition so seamless that I hadn't even realized it had happened until I saw myself lying there, motionless. I felt weightless, as though I had been freed from something I hadn't even known was holding me down. It wasn't until that moment that I realized just how heavy life had been, how much pain, fear, and worry I had carried every single day. The burdens of the world, the struggles of existence, all seemed so distant now. I was free, floating in a space where none of it mattered anymore. Yet, despite this overwhelming peace, there was something else, a presence, an awareness that I wasn't alone. Though I couldn't see anyone, I could feel something around me, something watching, guiding. It wasn't threatening or frightening, but rather comforting, like an unseen force that had always been there, waiting for this moment. I wasn't sure if it was something or someone, but I knew, without a doubt, that I was being led somewhere. For a brief moment, I wondered if this was it, if this was where my journey ended. I looked down at my body, at the people working so hard to save it, and I felt a strange sense of gratitude. Not regret, not sadness, just gratitude. Gratitude for every breath I had taken, for every moment I had lived, for the love I had given and received. I saw my life flash before me, not in a linear sequence, but all at once, memories unfolding like pages in a book, each one vivid and full of meaning. I saw myself as a child, laughing without worry, running through fields without knowing the weight that adulthood would bring. I saw moments of joy, moments of heartbreak, moments of struggle and triumph, all blending together into a tapestry of existence. And yet, as I watched, I realized something profound. None of it mattered the way I thought it did. The worries, the fears, the endless striving for things that seemed so important in life, they all felt so small now, so insignificant compared to the overwhelming sense of love that surrounded me. I turned my focus back to the scene below, watching as the people around my body grew more frantic. Time didn't feel the same in this place. It was stretched, fluid, unbound by the constraints of seconds and minutes. I wasn't sure how long I had been floating there, watching, but I knew that something was about to change. There was a shift, a subtle pull, something guiding me toward what was next. The presence around me grew stronger, more tangible, though I still couldn't see it. It was as though I were being called forward, invited into something greater. I wasn't afraid. If anything, I was ready. The world below, the body I had once inhabited, felt like a distant memory now. I was standing on the edge of something vast, something beyond human comprehension. And I knew, without a doubt, that I was about to cross into a realm far beyond anything I had ever known. The pull became stronger, an invisible force urging me forward. It wasn't something I could resist, nor did I want to. It felt as if I were being drawn into something greater, something beyond all human comprehension. The darkness around me wasn't empty, it was vast and filled with an energy I couldn't define. It didn't feel like a void, nor did it feel like nothingness. Instead, it carried a deep sense of knowing, of being, as if I had stepped into a place that existed beyond the limits of time itself. The air, if I could call it that, had a weight to it, but not in a physical sense. It pressed against me, wrapping around me like an unseen presence. It was comforting, not suffocating, and within it, I could feel a kind of warmth that wasn't tied to temperature but to something far deeper. There was no fear, no hesitation, just an unshakable certainty that I was being guided toward something beyond my understanding. I became aware of movement, though I had no physical form. I wasn't walking, I wasn't flying, but I was traveling. A tunnel began to take shape before me, but it wasn't made of anything solid. It wasn't a physical space in the way I had always understood spaces to be. It was light and presence, stretching out before me, pulling me deeper into its embrace. The walls shimmered, shifting like liquid gold, pulsating with an energy that seemed alive. There was no sound, but at the same time, there was music, music that wasn't heard with ears but felt within the very essence of my being. It resonated through me, filling every part of what I was, as if I had become a note in a song that had existed since the beginning of time. As I moved through this space, I felt something stir deep within me. It was an awareness, a knowing, a recognition of something I had long forgotten but had always been a part of me. This place wasn't foreign, it wasn't strange, it felt like home. The further I went, the more I realized that I was shedding something, not physically, but spiritually. The weight of my past, the worries of life, the regrets and fears that had clung to me for so long, they were fading. They weren't being taken from me. They were dissolving on their own, as if they had never truly belonged to me in the first place. Ahead of me, the tunnel began to widen, and the light grew stronger. It wasn't harsh or blinding, it was welcoming, soft, yet unimaginably powerful. It wasn't just light, it was alive. It carried presence, intelligence, love. The closer I came, the more I realized that I wasn't just seeing it. I was feeling it, becoming a part of it, as if it were reaching into the deepest parts of my being and calling me by a name I had forgotten but had always belonged to me. I felt the presence before I saw it. It was vast, infinite, and yet deeply personal. It knew me, not just as a person, not just as a soul, but as something beyond both. It had known me before I was ever born, before I had ever taken my first breath. It had been with me in every moment of my life, even the ones I thought I had lived alone. It had seen my joys, my struggles, my failures, my triumphs, and it had never turned away. The presence didn't judge, didn't condemn. It simply loved, completely and without condition. As I continued forward, I became aware of something else. There were others, not physical forms, not people in the way I had known them before, but souls, beings of light, moving all around me. I couldn't see them with eyes, but I felt them with every part of my existence. They were familiar and unfamiliar at the same time, as if I had always known them yet had never met them before. They were neither strangers nor acquaintances. They simply were, and in their presence, I felt nothing but peace. The further I traveled, the stronger the presence became. It filled everything, wrapped around me like a warm embrace, and in that moment, I understood something I had never understood in life. I wasn't separate from it. I never had been. None of us were. We had always been connected, always been part of something greater. It wasn't that I had been taken somewhere new. It was that I was remembering something that had always been true. The light ahead of me began to shift, taking form, taking shape, though not in a way that the human mind could fully comprehend. It wasn't an image seen with eyes but a presence felt with every fiber of my being. It was familiar, deeply familiar, in a way that went beyond memory, beyond time, beyond anything I had ever known before. It wasn't just love, it was the source of love itself, the origin of everything good, everything pure, everything eternal. I wanted to move closer, to fully step into it, to embrace whatever was waiting for me. Every part of me longed for it, not with desperation, but with a certainty that this was where I was always meant to be. I had no doubt, no hesitation. I was ready. The presence grew stronger, and as I reached forward, I felt a voice, not a voice that spoke in words, but one that resonated within the very core of my being. It was calling my name. Not the name I had been given in life, but the name my soul had always carried. It was gentle, yet powerful, filled with love that had no limits, no conditions. It was welcoming me, embracing me, drawing me forward into something greater than I had ever imagined. The presence before me wasn't just light, wasn't just love. It was him. The presence before me was unlike anything I had ever encountered. It was not just light, not just warmth, it was alive. It carried a depth that no words could ever fully describe. It was as if the very essence of love had taken form, radiating with an intensity that did not burn but embraced. Every part of me recognized it, even though my mind struggled to comprehend. I knew, without being told, that I was standing in the presence of Jesus. There was no question, no doubt. He was not a distant figure, not a mere historical name or a concept I had learned about. He was real, more real than anything I had ever known. His presence was overwhelming in the gentlest way, a force so powerful that it could shatter worlds, yet so tender that it cradled my soul as if it had always belonged there. He did not need to speak for me to understand. His very being communicated more than words ever could. I felt seen in a way I never had before, not just as a person, but as something deeper, something eternal. Every part of me, every thought I had ever had, every mistake I had ever made, every joy, every sorrow, it was all laid bare before him, and yet there was no shame, no fear. Only love, a love so pure, so complete, that it erased every doubt, every insecurity I had ever carried. I realized, in that moment, that I had never truly known what love was until now. The light around him pulsed with an energy that was alive, flowing through everything, filling every space with a peace that surpassed all understanding. I could not see his face the way I had seen faces in life, but I knew him. His presence alone was enough. It was not about appearance, not about features, it was about essence. I knew him the way a child knows the embrace of a parent, the way the ocean knows the pull of the moon. It was recognition beyond memory, beyond knowledge. I had always known him, even when I hadn't realized it. A flood of emotions washed over me. Gratitude, awe, humility. The weight of my entire existence, the questions that had haunted me, the uncertainties, they all seemed to dissolve in the radiance of his presence. He knew everything, not just the things I had spoken, not just the things I had done, but the deepest corners of my heart, the fears I had never voiced, the struggles I had never shared. And still, there was no condemnation. Only love, only acceptance, only a presence so holy and yet so close that it felt as though I had never been apart from it. Time did not exist here the way it did in life. There was no past, no future, only now. And in this now, I understood more than I ever had in all my years on earth. It was not just knowledge that filled me, it was understanding, deep and unshakable. I did not need to ask questions because I already knew the answers, not through words, but through knowing itself. I saw glimpses of my life, but not in the way I had before. This was not just a replay of events, it was a revelation of truth. I saw not only what had happened, but the why behind it. I saw moments of pain and struggle that I had once resented, but now I understood their purpose. They had shaped me, refined me, drawn me closer to something greater. I saw moments of love, of kindness, of selflessness, and I realized that those were the moments that had mattered most. It was never about accomplishments, never about status or recognition. It had always been about love. Every act of kindness, every moment of compassion, no matter how small, had rippled into eternity in ways I had never imagined. I felt his presence draw even closer, and in that moment, I understood what it meant to truly be home. This was where I had come from. This was where I had always belonged. Every longing I had ever felt in life, every desire that had never been fulfilled, had been a shadow of this reality. The ache I had never been able to describe, the sense that something was always missing, it had always been him. He knew my name, not the name I had been given in life, but the name my soul had carried since the beginning. It was not just a name, it was identity, purpose, belonging. When he spoke, it was not with sound, yet his voice filled every part of me. It was a voice that had spoken stars into existence, that had calmed storms, that had called the dead back to life. And now, it spoke to me, not as a stranger, not as a servant, but as his own. There was no fear in his presence, no uncertainty. I did not feel small, though he was greater than anything I had ever known. I did not feel unworthy, though he was pure and holy beyond measure. Instead, I felt whole. I felt as if, for the first time, I was seeing myself as I was always meant to be, not as the world had defined me, not as my failures had tried to shape me, but as he had created me. His presence carried weight, not as a burden, but as a truth so immense that it left no room for anything else. And in that truth, there was only one thing that mattered. Only one thing that had ever mattered. Love. A love so vast, so consuming, that it had no beginning and no end. A love that had existed before time itself. A love that had always been reaching, always been calling, always been waiting. I wanted nothing else, nothing more. I was finally where I was meant to be. I was finally home. The feeling of warmth, of divine love, surrounded me in a way I had never experienced before. It was not a love that could be compared to anything on earth. No human relationship, no fleeting moment of joy, no sense of security had ever come close. It was something deeper, something eternal. It was as though I had finally stepped into the place I had been searching for my entire life without even knowing it. Everything I had once worried about, everything I had feared, seemed so distant now, as if it had never truly mattered in the way I once thought it did. I felt lighter than I ever had, as though the weight of existence had been lifted from me. And yet, in that lightness, there was a deep knowing, an awareness that my journey was not complete. There was something more, something unfinished. It was not spoken aloud, but I understood it completely. The presence before me, the overwhelming love, the infinite peace, it did not push or command. It simply was, and in its being, I understood that there was a choice. Not in the way decisions are made on earth, not with the confusion of conflicting emotions or the fear of making the wrong one, but with absolute clarity. I had been given a glimpse of something beyond, something sacred, something that existed outside of time and space. And yet, I knew that I was being called back. The realization settled over me, not as a disappointment, but as a purpose being revealed. The presence of Jesus did not fade, nor did the love surrounding me lessen, but there was a shift, an understanding that my time in this place was not yet meant to last. I felt no urgency, no pressure, but rather a gentle awareness that my path was not yet complete. As I stood, or rather existed, within the presence that had known me before I was ever born, I felt the memories of my life stir within me once again. They were no longer fragmented, no longer moments defined by time, but part of a greater whole. I saw the lives I had touched, the moments that had seemed insignificant but had carried great meaning. I saw the words I had spoken, the actions I had taken, and how they had rippled beyond what I had ever realized. I saw the people I had loved, the ones who had been left behind. I saw their faces, their hearts aching with grief, their voices calling out in desperation. I felt their sorrow, not as a weight upon me, but as a reminder of the connection that bound us all. Love did not end. It never had. It was eternal, stretching beyond the boundaries of life and death, unbroken by the passage of time. The pull toward them was gentle, but undeniable. I understood now that my journey had not been about escaping life, but about seeing it from a different perspective. I had been given a glimpse of what lay beyond, but that glimpse was not meant to be the end. It was meant to be the beginning of something new. I did not resist. There was no struggle, no fear of returning, only the quiet acceptance that I had more to do. I felt myself being drawn backward, the brilliant light still surrounding me, but now becoming something I was moving away from rather than toward. The warmth remained, the love did not fade, but my awareness shifted. I was no longer standing in eternity, I was being pulled back into time. The sensation was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was not like waking up from a dream, nor was it like falling. It was a transition, seamless and fluid, as though I were being gently woven back into the fabric of existence. The memories of the place I had been did not vanish, but they became something else, something that would live within me rather than something I was immersed in. As I moved, I became aware of my body once more. The weight of it, the density of flesh and bone, the limits of breath and heartbeat. It was strange, after feeling so free, to return to something so fragile, so temporary. But I understood now that this fragility was not a weakness, it was a gift. Life itself was a gift. The first breath I took was heavy, as though I were relearning how to exist within the confines of my own body. I could hear voices, distant at first, then growing clearer. There were hands on me, movement, the sensation of something pressing against my chest. I felt pain, but it was distant, unimportant compared to what I had just experienced. I opened my eyes, the world around me blurry and unfamiliar, and yet, I knew exactly where I was. I had returned. The people surrounding me gasped, their eyes wide with disbelief, their hands still pressed against me as if afraid to let go. I could see their faces, the tears in their eyes, the raw emotion written across them. I was back, but I was not the same. I could never be the same again. I had seen what lay beyond the veil of life. I had felt the presence of Jesus, stood in the light of something far greater than I could ever put into words. And now, I had been given a second chance. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had not returned without reason. There was a purpose to this, a reason I had been sent back. There was something I needed to share, something I needed to do. The love I had felt, the peace I had experienced, it was not meant to be kept to myself. It was meant to be given, to be lived, to be shared. I had been brought back for a reason. And that reason would shape the rest of my life.